All right, greetings, everyone. We are live again. Dynasty Mirror Search for Huru. Thank you all. Thank you so much for joining. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Also, make sure you go to dynastymirror.com. Tours. We're rolling to Nigeria in August for the Oshun Festival. We got a couple spots remaining. So if you'd like to roll to Nigeria with us, just let me know. Hit me up. Make sure you visit Danfo, DANFO Africa. Again, Danfo, DANFO Africa. Also, Sierra Leone this November. We're rolling to Sierra Leone this November. Citizenship is available to those who qualify. So if you're interested in enrolling to Sierra Leone with us or Nigeria, please visit Danfo, DANFO Africa. Send me a message and I will get back to you. Without further ado, it's been a minute. We got brother Ebube on with us, back on with us today. Like I said, it's been a minute. In today's topic, we're going to continue this conversation in regards to Russia's relationship with Africa, and how I guess America is feeling kind of salty about it. Even though the West has not brought any type of development to Africa, and as we see, Russia and China, they've been more and better of as far as when it comes to collaboration and collaborators with Africa. For some reason, America is just they're kind of upset and jealous still. So we're gonna dive into that in about 30 minutes. We'll open up the lines. You guys can call in and join the conversation to add to the convo. But Abube, go ahead and introduce yourself and take it away.
Um, Good to be back on Search for Uhuru. Good to be talking with you again, Dynast.
Mhm.
For all those who don't know me and for those who do, my name is Ebube Okoli. I'm a Nigerian-born, American-trained attorney. I'm also the creative director at Up Close and Center, which is a channel here on YouTube. If you haven't already been over to the channel, here's the logo, Up Close and Center. Make sure you head on over there and subscribe. Also, make sure that you're subscribed here at this channel and make sure that you hit the like button to show your appreciation for our brother Dice and his content. And yeah, it's good to be back.
So let me read this comment to you. Africa doesn't need America's approval. Well, what are your thoughts on that comment, Ebube? And guys, make sure you hit that like button as you come to the chat room too. What are your thoughts on that? Because I mean, yes, it's like a yes and no. Or am I wrong? Like, what are your
Well,
thoughts on
here's
that?
the thing. Before we even get into that, let's build up, and then I'm going to answer
Okay,
that particular question, and
go
it
ahead.
should be evident by the time that I get to the end of. So, for those who don't know, who've been living under a rock, Russia, of course, invaded the Ukraine in order to most likely. Now, here's the problem with Russia and Ukraine: is that the heartland of Russia is the part that's really more so in Europe. That's really where like 70% of the population actually lives. That's the heartland. And it's in something called the Great European Plain, which is just flat land, which is very bucolic. It's very beautiful. However, it's also very easy to roll tanks onto it. And that's why during World War II, Hitler was so successful because it's flat land. And if I just roll enough tanks in, it's going to be a pretty easy time. So Russia is consistently faced with the threat of a ground invasion that can be very successful because it simply can't afford to defend all that territory. And so the Ukraine, which sits literally nestled into the heartland of Russia, started leaning more towards NATO and the West. And of course, this made Russia very uncomfortable because Russia can't militarize and defend that border. It would simply go bankrupt. It would be the equivalent of China pulling Canada over to its side and then militarizing the American-Canadian border. It would just be too much land to have to defend the threat of a consistent ground attack. So what Russia did is they said, listen, if you're gonna, be in cahoots with these guys, we're gonna bring about a regime change or we're gonna do certain things.
Mhm.
So Russia invaded, of course, and they wanted to actually. There's a river that bifurcates the Ukraine, splits the Ukraine in two. and there's three main crossing points. Russia essentially wanted to push itself and then anchor against those three main points so that you really only have three ground routes in through there. However, that was unsuccessful. Russia was largely sloppy in their logistical war. They were the clear winner in the fact that they haven't. It's like, I'm pretty good at basketball, but it's like me challenging LeBron James to a game to 10, and we've been playing for 5 minutes, and he's only up by 1 point. Mm-hmm. That looks worse on him than it does on me, even though technically I would be losing. But even though I probably wouldn't lose to LeBron James, but that's neither here nor there. But now Russia, for the fact that Russia's been struggling like this, that doesn't really bode well for Russia in regards to its military presence. So you already have nations like Finland, Sweden, potentially saying, all right, we might have to click up with NATO, even though it might not favor them as much as some of the other members, because there's certain provisions that aren't necessarily in their potential agreement. And so now you have Russia invaded, and of course the United States has put sanctions on Russia and essentially said, okay, Russia, you're not going to be in the club, and there's certain economic sanctions that they're putting on Russia. Now, when it comes to Africa, almost half of the African nations are basically abstaining. Some are coming out in support of Russia. A handful of nations have come out in support of the United States, which made the United States kind of say, wait a minute, we said that this invasion was wrong. We've determined that Russia is the aggressor. They have no basis for invading this sovereign nation. Why don't you guys particularly see it like that? And some African nations, they see it as if, well, Russia was defeated after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Why push NATO all the way up to the doorsteps of Russia? Well, now it would be good for the Western allies, or the NATOs as we'll call them, to permanently put Russia in a position where a ground invasion is almost certain. That would be great for them. Of course, for Russia, that would be terrible. They'd be permanently checkmated. So now you have Russia in a situation where some African nations are saying, well, if you wouldn't have kicked the hornet's nest, we wouldn't have to be making decisions. And this is really deep, because you have to remember Africa has more foreign troops on ground than any other continent. So now you have French troops, you have American troops, you have Brits, you have Russian mercenaries now. And so because the African nations aren't necessarily voting on certain things and upholding certain things, that creates a loophole where Russia can simply say, well, if I don't trade with you, I'll just trade with this other block of nations. And so in the I believe it was the Senate or the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, I believe, there was legislation that was recently passed, overwhelmingly passed, that deals with countering the Russian influence in Africa.
Was that actually passed, or was it just presented to the?
Well, there's bicameral legislation, so there's several steps before a bill becomes a law. It has to pass through certain phases and then be signed. So it hasn't passed into law. I'll say that so we don't run into any confusion. So it hasn't passed into law. However, the overwhelming support that it received in the legislative body which it was voted on, I think it went through the House. I think 400 votes yes, 9 votes no. But I was reading through the bill, and what struck me is that the words of the actual legislation. So when it comes to legislative interpretation, what lawyers and lawmakers are taught is that you want to avoid vagueness and ambiguity, because the law has to make you aware of what's illegal and what's legal, what's not allowed and what is allowed. But if there's a vague law, well, then I can use that in ways that the crafters didn't intend for me to use. And so that was the first thing that struck me, is that I was trying to figure out, okay, what acts are exactly covered under this? Now, what I believe about the legislation is that it was in reaction to the potential courting of African nations by Russia and China, Russia particularly, China generally. So you have, so for example, let's take a look at what's going on in Mali. And if you don't know what's going on in Mali, it goes back to France-Afrique, Charles de Gaulle. All right, France colonized large areas of Africa, and they really need Africa, or else, as one of their presidents said, they'll essentially be a third world nation without being able to wield vast influence in Africa. So now, as colonialism was coming to an end because of violent revolutions, they said, okay, we're fighting wars all over the place because the indigenous people, they don't want to be colonized, and who would want to be colonized? And you should fight colonialism because everybody has a God-given right to sovereignty, to nationhood, without being dominated or subjugated by another nation. So now, if you would have had violent revolutions in places like Nigeria, for example, that could have got really messy for the British. You know, you had Algeria and you had other African nations, but Charles de Gaulle crafted a system called France-Afrique, where it was essentially, as some have called it, colonialism 2.0.
Right.
Where, and if you haven't been to Up Close and Center, I did a documentary on that. It's a pretty good documentary. I would say check it out if you haven't been, but I cover all of this, so I'm just going to gloss over it and move on. But France has deep colonial ties in Africa, very strong colonial ties where they reap the reward of most of the benefits, if you will. And many analysts have called into question why France controls monetary policy for so many independent nations. Because by definition, if you're an independent nation, you should be able to control. And you have to remember that when it comes to sovereignty, sovereignty is a recipe. It's made up of two things. You have your political independence, and then you have your economic independence. And the two of these things is what make your national sovereignty. So sovereignty is political independence and economic independence. What some allege is that when France left Africa, they merely gave political independence and withheld the economic independence. And if you know anything about how things work on a pragmatic level, the economics controls the politics in a lot of ways, right? He who has the gold makes the rules. So the economics controls the politics. So if I merely give you political independence while withholding economic independence from you, I can potentially dominate you for the next 500 years under that very same formula. However, you'll be seeing your people consistently being elected into place. And when things aren't going right, you're going to blame your people and your leaders, not knowing that economically you still don't have independence, and the economics actually control the politics of the particular location. So many have alleged that France essentially is still colonizing these nations. So now if you look at what happened in Mali and what's been happening in Mali, you understand that the government there is essentially saying, no more France. We're going to be completely independent. Now you have to remember that France has a large number of troops in the Sahel under the guise of counterterrorism and fighting insurgents and jihadists, which are truly in that area, but to the extent of which we don't actually know. Some say that the threat is overblown so that France can maintain large number of combatants in the area. Others say that it's an actual legitimate threat. So now we look at the situation, and so what nations like Mali have begun doing is that if you know anything about Russian contracting, military contractors, the company Wagner, WAG, allegedly, and the Russian government hasn't said that they were complicit with this, but of course, you never really know what the real story is. But we'll just go with the reported stories based on the evidence. They state that they're not fully. That they're not in any way coordinating the operations on ground. But essentially, what appears to be happening is that you have nations like Russia linking nations like Mali, for example, linking up with Russia and Russian military to essentially create a buffer between them and the potential threats from France.
Same with
And
Central African Republic, I think.
yes, sir. And you have them all over Africa, which you're inviting. It's almost like in ancient Africa a long time ago when you had the Romans. Oh my goodness, the Romans when they were in Africa, they were very brutal. They built coliseums and things all over like that, and they had Africans. If you ever seen Gladiator, you know what was going on. So you had situations like that, and then some of the Africans, when the Arabs came in the 7th century AD, they said, "Hey, help us get these Romans off of our backs, and the two of us can coexist here in peace, and we can share this land because you guys come from a desert, and there's a lot of fertile land here." And we see that after the Romans were kicked out with the help of the Arabs, and we see what happened after that, what transpired. That's a bit of history I'll let people go into when they have some more free time, but it didn't really go as well for the Africans as they thought, dealing directly with the Arabs in that particular time period in history.
Right.
So now some are saying, okay, is this the same thing where we have the Russians coming in Mali to help get the French off the backs of the Malian people, who seem to have grown tired of French rule behind the scenes, and now you're inviting in the Russians to help get them off of your back? Are we seeing another situation that we saw between the Romans and when they left, and what came in after that? So now you have this bill that's being pushed through the bicameral legislative process, and it's looking to address things like that, to say, oh, okay, Russia to an extent would like to see, they're not in Africa because of, and Africans, we understand that Europeans aren't in Africa politically for the love of Africa. They're there to further their nation's interests. The Chinese aren't in Africa for the weather. They're there to further their national interests, as they should. Every nation should seek to further their national interests. That's just what they should do, and you shouldn't be upset by that. It's not a game of emotions, it's a game of logic. It's almost like we're playing sports. You don't really hate the other team. You're not particularly upset with the other team. You're just playing as hard as you can until the whistle blows, and then you shake hands. And if they played well, you let them know you guys played well. And that's it. So all the nations are in Africa for their own benefit. So when we have the legislation that I was reading a few days ago, it looks like America, to an extent, might be looking to help their ally France maintain their network within Africa. They're looking to also make sure that the sanctions put on Russia can't be circumvented by Africa. And it's also looking to potentially, if they can do this properly, they may also want to replicate this to see if they could potentially stop China's rise in soft power. Mm-hmm. Now, the only thing is this, is that the Chinese, they come in with, and here's what China will do, for example. People fault China, but China, they have a need to be building things. Their economy is dependent on construction in certain lights and certain facets. So they need to be building things. So that's why you had the phenomenon of ghost cities and things like that, where they were just building stuff to build stuff for building stuff's sake. And then they realized, you know what, if we can approach African nations and say, hey, look, for example, by the end of this century, Lagos, Nigeria is going to be the largest city in the world, and there's no metro system. We can go ahead and build a world-class metro system. And rather than the government saving up for 10 years to implement this, we'll build it now, and then you just pay us over 10 years. So they come in with that. However, it's like getting a credit card. If you don't pay off the balance or pay off the loan, you're going to have problems. And sometimes we have leaders who aren't managing the economy correctly and potentially burdening future generations of Africans. based on how they're dealing with these loans. Now, are they predatory? Potentially. But if you allow a predatory loan to be taken, you have to look yourself in the face and say, well, why did I take that loan? And
Right.
if I did take the loan, then why didn't I stay on the people who took it to ensure that they paid it off according to the guidelines? So there's blame on a lot of sides. So that model that China has adopted has been widely popular. It's also been widely criticized by pundits and analysts alike. So America's bill that may become law, it's going to deal with that. And here's the issue. The question was, do African nations have to listen to America?
Right.
Well, the answer is no, you don't have to do anything, but then you have to remember that you don't have to pay your mortgage. You don't have to pay your rent. You don't have to obey the speed limit. You don't have to pay for your goods at Whole Foods. You can just walk. You can just walk on out.
You just walk out.
You can. Now, it may not be the best decision for you personally. Because you have to understand power dynamics. Now, if your former employer calls you up, and let's say that they haven't paid you, you're not on their rolls, you worked for them 10 years ago, and they say, hey, we need you to come in and just work 70 hours this week. We just really need you to do it. We're not going to pay you. You just need to do it. You're going to laugh. You're going to say, am I being pranked? No. Why would I do that? And they don't have any enforcement mechanism over you. But let's say you work for a particular company and they say, well, this week we're going to need you to work on the weekends. You work at some big law firms. You might be working on a Saturday and a Sunday. And the scary thing is some law firms have showers and places to really take a shower. You know, it's not a joke that employers literally sleep at the office.
All right.
Now, if they tell you we need you to come in on Saturday and Sunday and they're currently paying you, you don't have to go in, but then your livelihood may be in jeopardy. So when it comes to Africa and America, you have to remember that the power dynamic favors America currently. And that's the reality. So now if you're getting in cahoots with anybody else and America says don't make those type of deals, don't allow military operations or military personnel from these particular countries to arrive in your nation, well then, if you say no, you better hope that the country that you're calling in has enough power to prevent any consequences from adversely or negatively affecting your nation. That's just the reality. Philip Lindsay.
He's a fellow. He's a lawyer as well. So
yeah, so you already know. And the thing is, the worst thing is when they say, you know what, we got really nice dinner coming in at 8. So if you guys just work till 8, you know, you can, and the food's always good. So you're like, you know what, let me just stay here a few more hours, crank out some. So don't. So all my young attorneys, don't fall for the free dinner trick. You know, once they get you, they get you. But so yeah, so that's the answer to that question. Do you have to listen to America? And the short answer is no, but the long answer is, within the current power dynamic, yes, you do, and you should.
Guys, hit the like button again. Please hit the like button. We're gonna open up the lines here in about 10 minutes. So, Ebube, what's the worst that could happen? Say this bill passes, and you know African nations, they continue to foster this relationship with Russia. What's the worst thing that could happen?
All right, let's take a look at a nation that would probably fall under the ambit of what the law is trying to prevent. Now, we talked about Mali earlier, but let's go in depth with Mali. So now we see that France economically depends on Africa and African nations with their system, with their financial system. France really needs Africa. And so America, to an extent, needs France, needs Britain, Germany, the other NATO members. They need them to be strong as a counter to, and you have to remember that this goes back to a theory it's not my theory, it's Alexander Durgin's theory. He's a Russian writer, a philosopher. He a very brilliant historical figure. he came up with the land power versus the sea power. And he said that the world was basically, the core of the world is Eurasia and Africa. That's the world's landmass. That's like the giant continent. And then the nations to the periphery are America North, America South, Australia, and the islands scattered about the Pacific. Those are like the periphery nations, the periphery islands, if you will. So now the heartland of the world is Eurasia and Africa. All three of those continents are connected. If you look past the Suez Canal, which is an artificial ditch dug to split, one side of Africa from another side of Africa. So now you have, and the theory, and this is what a lot of Russian foreign policy, I believe the KGB, this is mandatory literature and reading for the KGB. But I've read most of the books. It's a very interesting theory, set of theories actually. But according to that, the land power and the sea power are always going to have problems, meaning whoever can control and exert their will over Eurasia, which is the Asian continent with the European peninsula, and Africa, whoever can exert power over that landmass is always going to have a problem with the sea power, right? Whoever can control the seas. So, for example, Russia has a weak navy because they don't really need a navy, right? They're a land power. They have almost more tanks than the rest of Europe. So now, according to that theory, the land power and the sea power are always going to have problems. But of course, the writer of that book favored the land power above the sea power, which was an interesting way to go. But it makes sense for him being a member of the land power nation. So now you have this eternal battle between China, Russia. They're not allies. They've gone to war several times. They're not really friends. China is claiming that Russia has part of its land just above Manchuria. And they're actually Chinese people starting to settle in that part of Russia in large numbers. And of course, China is going to revisit that again because China believes that eventually they're going to unify all of the pieces that belong to them, according to their theory. And parts of Russia, they allege, belong to them. So it makes it interesting. But the thing that unites them, even though they've had wars and conflicts in the past, the things that unites them is that their number one competitor for global dominance is the United States. So by no means are China and Russia really true allies in any sense of the word. It's just that they're allies of necessity rather than convenience. Where it just makes sense because the two of them are on top of America's most wanted list, for lack of better terms. So the number one country that we're looking at in regards to the law potentially affecting is Mali. Mali has a constant threat because there's so many French troops there, and allegedly a few weeks ago there was a failed coup attempt allegedly put on by France. That's they stated that it was a European power. So it's not a big leap in logic to say, okay, maybe France tried to get rid of this military government that's installed themselves and with anti-French sentiments. So now you have Mali, and so the Wagner group is allegedly on ground and acting as, Mali said they're just acting as trainers, and they're not actually on ground. And here's another issue. There's allegations that this military contractor group is essentially an extension of the Russian military. Russia, of course, denies this. But if they weren't, or if they actually were, that's not something Russia would confirm. So Russia merely denying that they're in control of this military contracting group, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not in control of this military contracting group. So some of
my understanding, the reason, if you don't mind me interjecting, sorry, Ebube, from my understanding, the reason why they send in like these contractors and third parties to do like what they're doing is so Russia technically isn't held liable for, so they do it through third parties.
And that's the allegation. So, and Russia of course denies those allegations, but they're expected to deny those allegations. So that it's called the cat's paw. One of the 48 laws of power is sometimes you want to be clandestine in how you move. So now you have Russia coming in and potentially creating a buffer because France might not want, in a colloquial term, that smoke with Russia. So now you have this buffer where they can't do what they potentially wanted or could have been able to do in the past because you have this group that's against France literally right there. It's kind of like what the Ethiopian emperor did when they were, I believe it was Menelik who defeated the Italians. I can't remember my Ethiopian history.
I think it was Menelik.
Yeah,
Menelik.
Menelik was a bad dude. The thing about Menelik is that when he realized that the Italians, they had these really, really good weaponry. They said, man, this guy has really, really good, these guys have good weapons. That's why they're so, how are so many Africans losing to these Europeans? So Menelik, and you have to remember, Ethiopia had an ambassador in Europe for a couple hundred years prior to this point. So they quickly found out, okay, let's send word to our ambassador in Europe to figure out what exactly is going on. And the ambassador, and word got back that these people had sophisticated weaponry. So he went ahead and said, okay, the Italians are coming to fight us. Who do the Italians have problems with? And so he found out the nations that had problems with the Italians, and he sent word to them and said, hey, look, we need these guns, the better guns than the Italians have. So if we can get those guns that the Italians have, well, maybe we can defeat them. And so it made the Ethiopian fighters on the same level with the Italians. But if you don't understand anything about Ethiopia, you understand that geography is very mountainous. It's crazy to invade a mountainous nation like that. And especially when these people are willing to die for their nation. You're not going to defeat them because you're coming to this foreign land from Italy to try and dominate and subjugate people. And these people are willing to give their lives for what they believe in. And they have the same weapons as you when you're going into the mountains to fight these crazy Africans. You're going to run back after a few heavy losses. So what happened is that Menelik used the geopolitics and two factions that were against each other in order to fulfill what he needed to do as an African. So if we look at Mali could potentially be doing the same thing by bringing them in. However, under this new law, or this bill, if it ever becomes law, that might give the impetus to say, okay, you're in violation of this law. And because you're in violation of this law, there's going to be regime change. And those are scary words for a regime. Because it means that you're going 6 feet under or you're going to The Hague. And none of them, and they're essentially the same thing at that potential point. So Mali, for example, would be on the chopping block potentially. And this is all alleged because the ties to Russia aren't exactly crystal clear. There's evidence that they are. However, Russia has come out to deny that. So that would be the first nation, if anything.
Here we go. Let me pull up this article. Guys, links in the chat room. Again, link is in the chat room. If you'd like to call in and add to the conversation, you're more than welcome to call in and add to the conversation. Again, link is in the chat room real quick. Let me pull this up. I didn't know about this attempted coup.
Attempted coup in Mali.
And guess what? Washington is readying another aid package for Kyiv. So
for who?
For Kyiv, for Ukraine.
Oh, for Ukraine. Oh, that makes sense.
I forgot to pronounce the correct way to pronounce Kyiv. It's not Kyiv. You pronounce it
differently
for Ukraine. How do you say it?
Kiev, I believe. Kiev. Ki and then Ev. Kiev.
Kiev. Okay. But so, from my understanding, Russia is winning the war, but America keeps sending this money. Russia's winning. Russia's winning.
Well, here's the thing about it's a
slow grind, but they're winning.
Well, they've changed objectives. See, initially, Russia wanted to take over half of Ukraine up until the Dnieper, I believe is the name of the river, and they wanted to split Russia in two. there's a river that it's like, the Mississippi bifurcates America. It's like me
Right.
saying take over everything up to the Mississippi and make that my defensive border because there's only so many crossings across the Mississippi.
Right.
Now, there's a river that splits the Ukraine in two. Russia's original objective was to take over everything until that, which would include the capital. And then what would happen is that they wanted to collapse the nation and potentially build smaller nations as a buffer zone, which would essentially be puppet states. Now, the new objective is to simply take over the coast and landlock the Ukraine. That's the new objective because they couldn't meet their original objective. They were actually pushed back in the north. So they said, okay, what we're going to do is we're just going to take over the entire coastal areas of the Ukraine, and we're going to turn the Ukraine into a landlocked nation, which would severely.
It looks like they're progressing with that. They're winning at that, from what it seems.
At that potential point, they're winning. They're about 50 to 60% towards that goal.
Right.
But Russia should have honestly be months ahead of where they are. There's a lot of logistical problems. The Russian military just isn't. They're not behaving to the level that would be expected of Russia. So they're winning, but like I said, it's like LeBron James only being up against somebody who's not in the NBA.
Right.
And they're playing one-on-one. It's like it should be 10-0 at that point.
Right.
But it's 7-5.
Well, I
so
mean,
you're winning. Yeah, you're winning, but you should really be winning to the point where it's undisputed. And right now, it's you're winning, but it's not convincing. But Russia is winning. You're absolutely right.
But you can say the same thing like about America with Afghanistan. I mean, is that correct? I mean,
yeah. You can say the same thing. Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. All right, African always. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Dynast, for a stimulating conversation. Some perspectives. What's the GDP of Russia? It's 1.9 trillion. That's the GDP of New York or Texas. It's a big country. It's a massive country in terms of size, but it is not a very big country in terms of economy. Russia essentially is a petrostate with some grains thrown into it. In other words, their biggest export is hydrocarbons and some grains thrown into it. In other words, their biggest. I'm hearing some. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Well, one second. Ibarra, you have to do me a favor. You got to turn off the playback system. All right, go ahead, African always.
Yeah. So it's a petrostate with a massive military, and by massive military I mean large, not necessarily the most sophisticated. Essentially, Russia realizing that it's outnumbered in terms of economics. Large, not necessarily.
Ibarra, I muted you, but you got to turn off the playback when I unmute you. All right, go
That's
ahead,
your original YouTube channel. You have to mute that.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a petrostate with a massive military and obviously about 6,000 nukes. So, and that's Russia's an interesting country because it is a European Eurasian country, and the psychology behind Russia, and this is important because if you understand the psychology behind Russia and history of it, you get a better understanding of what is happening to Russia today and why it is struggling so much in Ukraine. It is as Okoli, is that his first name? Okay, Okoli says, yeah.
Ebube.
As Ebube said, they should be doing much better in terms of what was projected outside. But there's a dirty little secret in Russia that is obviously becoming clear to everybody. Russia in 2008 decided it was going to overhaul its military because it was The military was really outdated. Unfortunately for the Russians, there's a group of people called the oligarchs, and literally they controlled Russian industry. And so when it came time to rebuild the military, a significant chunk of that money was siphoned off. And so you find Russian equipment now, still using 20, 30-year-old technology. And even the modern ones that they have are mostly off-the-shelf Chinese and whatever Western things they can get their hands on. So it's a really, this war actually has presented, or at least opened up Russia, because Russia, another big thing that Russia sells is arms, right? They sell arms to places like India and other countries. This has exposed a significant weakness, because now people who buy arms are looking at the results of these tools, this equipment.
Right, but from my understanding, so right now where we stand, Russia hasn't technically declared war against Ukraine.
They're never going to do that.
Right, it's a special operation.
Of
So
course.
from my understanding, they're not really throwing everything at Ukraine.
Correct. They're not throwing everything at Ukraine, but you have to remember, Ukraine is a tiny country in terms of military compared to Russia. I mean, this is something that technically, so there are two parts to war. One is to take over a country. The other part is to keep it, right? The takeover part is always the easy part. You go in, you smack up somebody, especially if you're powerful, and you basically suppress their air superiority, air defenses, and then essentially you just march in. Remember, they started this thing with 200,000 troops. 200,000 troops. With the equipment they have, they should have been much, much, much further. But the problem is,
you're saying 200,000 troops invaded.
Yeah, they
Ukraine?
actually started out with 200. Remember, they did the exercise. Yeah, because remember, they were doing this exercise for months now, and the whole idea was the West was saying, "Hey, you're going to attack Ukraine," and they were saying, "No, this is an exercise." And so they combined with Belarus, and the two countries had this what we call joint exercise, and it's from the joint exercise one morning on February 24th we see this attack. Now, the reason they did it with Belarus is because if you decapitate Kiev and Kharkiv, you essentially have Ukraine. The other thing that they didn't count on, and this is where intelligence comes in, they didn't count on the fact, well, they were counting on the fact that Zelensky was going to pack up and run. And remember, Zelensky was offered a plane ride from the Americans, from the British, from the Germans to leave Kiev. And if he did that, the country would have succumbed. But he did something that none of them were predicting, which is he was going to, because everybody thought this was going to be a piece of cake for Russia. Because based on numbers, based on stats, based on what we in the West, from analysis thought, the most surprised people are probably in the Pentagon, because they really expected Russia to behave and be much more successful. But this particular guy did something that nobody was expecting. Not even the Americans were. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent a plane for him. The British wouldn't have sent a plane for him, and he rejected that as well. And the Germans wouldn't have sent a plane for him, and he rejected that. So the mere fact that he did that kind of showed them up to say, hey, look, here's a guy who has a third-rate military, who is standing up to a monster, because Russia is a much bigger country and a much more powerful country in terms of arms and everything else. And so now what you have is you're going to see swings in this war. The first part was a failure, just because they wanted to decapitate, as I said, and take the country over. Because once you take Kiev and Kharkiv over, you. By the way, I've been to Kiev as well. And I've been to Moscow, and I've been to St. Petersburg. But the one thing I'm going to say is that's what they expected.
Hold on one second. Hey, U.S. lawyer, there's some feedback coming from U.S. lawyer, so just I'll mute you for right now.
Yeah, I'm going to sum this up real quick and then just keep quiet so that Ebube can speak. But the point is, you're going to see swings, because the West didn't want to fight this war. They actually some in the West, especially Germany, wanted Kiev to just turn over and say, "Hey, listen," because Germany has a lot of oil, and they're kind of tied to the Russian economy much more than any other country. So they up until this point, they haven't even sent significant weapons because they don't really they want the relationship with Russia to remain the same. The problem for them is that even though they're the largest economy in Europe, everybody else, especially the British, are pushing this thing, and so
yeah, but I mean they're pushing it, but they're setting Ukraine up for failure.
I don't,
right
you know, look, it's going to be a stalemate. Anyone who thinks this is going to end quick is misunderstanding this.
I don't think it'll be a stalemate. I'll give it another at the most by end of summer. It'll be over. Guys, I'll put that on record. In the summer,
good.
It'll be over.
Now, look, at any point, either side can say, "Let's negotiate." So that's a possibility. The question though is militarily, because right now the success Russia is having is because of its long-range artillery, right? That is the success, because what you do is you pulverize a city and terrorize a city.
Right, and that's what they're doing in southern Ukraine right now.
Correct. And it's a successful strategy.
They're shelling the cities, pulverizing them, then they're sending the ground troops in, and
precisely.
Right.
But here's the thing: the West, up until last week, refused to send long-range artillery. The longest one is that howitzer that they sent over recently. But they're going to send a new set of artillery that's called the M117. That artillery is 100 kilometer range.
Okay, but America, Biden already said he's not going to send.
No. They've already decided that it's going. The question is how much of it and how quick can they get it there? Because
from my understanding, number one, and sorry to cut you off,
the
Ukrainians don't even have the proper training to use the weapons. The first shipment of weapons that was sent by America to Ukraine was old, rusty weapons that's been sitting in storage since the 90s, and some of the weapons they couldn't even.
Yes, the first set of weapons that were sent.
Right.
Fall under that category, but there are three tranches of weapons that were sent. The first set of weapons, frankly, that were sent were not even American weapons. They were mostly ex-Soviet weapons, and they were backfilled by the American and the Europeans and so forth. The second set of weapons, and the other thing they sent also, was a lot of these small anti-tank missiles, which are really good for urban warfare, but has no use in an open field where somebody can pick you off from 50, 60 miles away. What I'm telling you though is that this is going to be a proxy war between the United States and Russia. Anyone who doesn't think that doesn't know how war is fought. And by proxy, what they're going to do is they're going to drain Russia. That's their whole objective. It's to drain Russia. And the way you drain Russia, whether it be successful or not, that's a separate story. But what I'm telling you is that their intent is to drain Russia. And the way they're going to drain it is this. The first set of mid-range artillery that they sent, they did not even send the computers with it. In other words, there's a computer that goes on it that makes it much more accurate.
But why even send the weapons then? Why even send?
Because they're going to this. I'm telling you what their objective is. Their objective, just like the same way Russia has an objective, which is to take the whole of the Donbass and create a direct line from there to
right now they're actually doing. And
that's what I'm saying to you. I'm saying to you that
always African. Not to interrupt, but Russia recently changed the goal objectives about 2 weeks ago. Initially, it was to get to the river that bifurcates the Ukraine and then have new bargaining terms, or either collapse the remaining part of the Ukraine into about 2 to 3 nations that would all essentially be puppet states. However, they were pushed back in the north. They lost Kiev, which would have been crucial. They were supposed to take that weeks ago. They didn't. And so they were pushed back. So now their new objective is to economically cripple the Ukraine. And then once they have, by economically crippling them, essentially taking over their access to the Black Sea, which would make them landlocked. And then from there, they could potentially have a better position to potentially push for regime change if they can make the nation economically struggle. The people of Ukraine might say, hey, look, let's get rid of this government, because if we have this government, we're going to struggle. We get rid of this government and install a pro-Russian government, Russia will lift this economic blockade that they have on the nation. That's essentially what Russia's goal objective is now. Now, what the West is doing, the West is saying, wait a minute, we actually kind of thought the Ukraine would have been gone by now. That's why we were just going to get the president out of there and say, sorry we wrecked your country, but you can live in exile and live good. But he decided to stay, which was shocking to me personally. I thought he would have got out of there, but he was willing to stay. And then Russia's poor performance. Russia is winning. However, for the fact that they had to change their goal objective midstream to a nation that they should have easily rolled into and took over, that to me, it's almost like America fighting a much smaller, less equipped nation in the Western Hemisphere like Puerto Rico, and there being this type of stalemate. You would say, well, Puerto Rico's is even though they're losing, they've been able to fight America for several months now. That in and of itself says something. But continue. You were making a point.
Well, yeah. let's get U.S. lawyer. Go ahead, U.S. lawyer. Unmute yourself, U.S. lawyer.
I want to say, can you hear me?
Hear you just fine.
Okay. Good afternoon, gentlemen. So first of all, nobody knows what Russia's initial objective was. That's just Pentagon spin and Pentagon propaganda. We don't know what the objective was. All we do know is the one thing Putin did say was that the problem he had was that was one of the worst things that ever happened was a bunch of Russian citizens.
Hey, U.S. lawyer, you're going in and out. Like U.S. lawyer, you're going in and out. You're going in and out.
Are you talking on a head?
Can you hear me now?
You're talking on a head?
Are you on a headset? Are you on a headset or what's?
Yeah, I'm on a headset.
Okay, can you
the
talk
headset's
directly to the phone?
Can you hear me better?
Yeah, it's going in and out. If you talk directly through the phone, go ahead.
Well, I'm on a computer, so I don't know if I can. Let me see if I can not move around or something. I don't know.
Okay, so while you're doing that, let me just, U.S. lawyer, while you're doing that, I'm going to throw in one piece to something. Here's how we do know what Russia's objectives are, because about 10 days ago, a little over a week and a half ago, Vladimir Putin came out and said, here are the new goal objectives. So for Vladimir Putin to say, here are my goal objectives, I would say that we do know what Russia's goal objectives are.
Yeah, but you know what his objectives are now at this point. But you don't know what they were from the beginning. So you don't know if they're really his new goal objectives.
No, in the beginning, they also listen. I think there's a lack of information on your side, because in the beginning, Vladimir Putin gave a 2-hour speech about what.
And I listened to every minute of it, and he didn't say anything about the stuff you said.
Just listen. Let's not talk over each other. Just listen, please. Now, the reason that I'm saying this is what comes straight from Vladimir Putin's mouth. So now what he stated that these were their goal objectives, and he stated why they were doing this. However,
stop there. Tell me what he stated. I listen. No, let's stop. Let's don't go back to talking. A monologue. No. Stop and explain. Since you said you said and why don't you let him? Why don't you tell us?
This isn't going to work.
Just give a monologue. Just tell us.
Guys, 1 second. U.S. lawyer, I need you to call. You got to get on a better device, U.S. lawyer.
I'm going to call you back on my phone, my cell phone.
Yeah, call from your cell phone, please. Call from your cell phone. All right, hold on. All right, go ahead, Ebube.
Yeah, and I'll finish what I was saying. It seems like U.S. lawyer came to not to really absorb anything, but to state his talking points, which seems unfortunate. I thought he was going to come with a little bit more insight than that. But what we're seeing here is and hopefully he calls back in, but hopefully he's still listening, because I'd like to give him a little bit of information that I don't believe that he has. But the thing about the information is that Vladimir Putin stated his objectives months ago. He said, here's why I'm doing this. I don't want to be mistaken. I don't want anybody to not understand what I'm doing. And then recently he came out and said, well, here are the new goal objectives because of this, this, and this. Now, what we can infer from that is that the war isn't going as they planned. Fortunately, unfortunately, depending on what side you're on. Now, the bigger issue is this, actually, in everything, and this goes back to the land power versus the sea power. Because what Russia has done is they have essentially taken themselves out of the United States system. So being that they're out of that system, and the system is just people who act in concert through thought, speech, and action towards a shared goal. So they're now outside of America's system. And it seems like them and China are trying to create their own system to rival the current world system, which is the system promulgated by the United States. So the war, regardless of how it goes for Russia, is going to have bigger implications on the system that was created out of the war, if you understand where I'm going with that. But we got a little bit off topic. But the main issue that we're looking at here, and the reason that we're even discussing Russia, is that the effects that this singular action by Russia has had on the world, almost every nation is affected. So, for example, Egypt right now is struggling with food. You have to remember that only about 3% of Egypt's landmass is habitable. So in Egypt, the problem is that they import a lot of wheat directly from Ukraine, which is just above them. And they import a lot of wheat from Russia. And now these imports is the law that's being put forth by the House and Senate, or the bill, I should say, rather, it hasn't become a law. How is that going to affect trade? So, for example, if 50% of your wheat imports come from Russian exports, and there's a sanction, and you live in a desert nation like Egypt, and you can't produce enough food for your large population, is this law going to penalize them? And U.S. lawyer, if he indeed is a lawyer, will tell you that when it comes to vagueness, if a law is too vague, essentially it can be unconstitutional.
So I can interject real quick, but from my understanding, like Northern Africa, from Egypt, Tunisia, they primarily import their wheat from Ukraine. Now, sub-Saharan, they get it from Russia. So I think Putin said pretty much business as usual with the sub-Saharan countries that they're getting that they're exporting their wheat to.
That's correct.
In Africa. So I think.
So now the question is, does this law cover that? Because if certain economic sanctions are put on Russia, and then because of the vagueness of the actual law, what's actually covered? And then if you're in violation of this actual law, what's the penalty?
A big challenge.
Well, African always real quick. I want U.S. lawyer. Let's see if you got your connection back. But Ebube, to answer U.S. lawyer's question now, from the beginning, all I heard Putin say was he wanted to denazify Ukraine. That's all he talked about, was getting rid of the Nazis.
Well, the reason that they use the Nazi imagery is you got to remember that the Nazis killed more Russians than anybody. So now when Russians think back to their horror story, if you will, it was at the hands of the Nazis, because remember that most of what we called Russia then is on the Great European Plain. So they just rolled tanks in and they literally killed man, woman, child, civilian, soldier, dogs, whatever they can get their hands on. They were on a destroy mission. So I think about 20 million Russians died, which was a huge number. So in order to stir up the Russian people, they bring up the imagery of World War II. And they say, well, these guys are essentially Nazis. And to them, Nazis is just a code word for Western Europeans, if you will. It's loose. It's a loose code word for Western Europeans within Russia. So when he uses Nazis, it's just in order to galvanize his people, because his people suffered great losses at the hands of the Germans when they were under the Nazi regime. So when they say to denazify, what he really means is that these people are in bed with Western European powers. And the last time Western European powers came to Russia, it was during the reign of Adolf Hitler in Germany. Therefore, we lost almost 20 million plus people. So what they're doing in Ukraine is they're getting ready to do to us as Russians what the Nazis did to us as Russians. Therefore, we need to go in and invade. So, and once again, it goes back to the fact that you have to look at it's all about geopolitics. Ukraine just has so much flat land that connects to Russia. Russia wanted to, and this is why the Soviet Union anchored themselves where they did against those mountains in Austria, and then essentially wanted Poland, because Poland is the start of the funnel. It's like a fan. Poland is here, and then Europe fans out into Russia with flat land. This is why the old Russian Empire made an agreement with the Nazi regime to split Poland in two, because if anything happened, they're fighting at the mouth of the funnel as opposed to deeper inside of the funnel. They called it the buffer states or the Iron Curtain later, but essentially it's because of geographics. You have all this flat land. And if you have Ukrainians who are now getting into bed with, as Vladimir Putin put it, Nazis or the West, he's essentially saying that Russia is open to attack. And so that's really the main thing there. So hopefully that answered U.S. lawyer's question.
Okay. So this is what we'll do. I know U.S. lawyer Ebube, I know you guys are very opinionated. So U.S. lawyer, I'm gonna give you the floor for 2 minutes. Let's not try to interrupt, and then African always Ebube, you could respond. But U.S. lawyer, go ahead. U.S. lawyer. U.S. lawyer. U.S. lawyer, you gotta go ahead. U.S. lawyer, we can't hear you. All right. Yeah, U.S. lawyer, you got to call back in. We can't.
Yeah, because I can see him toggling his mic.
Yeah.
U.S. lawyer, it seems that you're still muted. Hit the mute button. It should be in the bottom left-hand corner.
Yeah, U.S. lawyer, call. Well, he was unmuted, but we can't hear him. So, hold on 1 second. Ibarra.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So I hope everybody is doing well.
Yes, we are. I am.
Yes.
Indeed, it's been a while.
Yes, go ahead.
The only thing that I actually just want to mention that I want us as Black people to start paying attention to, at some point, we have to stop giving power to what the US is saying. America has spent the entire existence fighting war everywhere. So I personally don't care between what is going on with Ukraine and Russia. That is white on white crime. Really, I don't care. However, I do care where the US is bullying Africa to start supporting them. We don't have to support you. Africa, wherever we are in the world, we need to start moving as a single unit. If the US attack Mali, they attack all the other Africans. We can't afford to say, who give a shit what Americans saying? Who cares about their law? America is not able to stop the people that were attacking the White House January 6th. You coming to bully Africa for what? It is up to all of us as the child of Africa to start educating our people, the government. We need to open our eyes. If we are not careful, we will end up again being colonized, being enslaved, because we're too scared and we're too stupid to figure out that these people no longer have power anymore. There is no way that the US should be passing any law regarding to Africa in any form. Now, all of us should be giving the US some kind of that we should saw in there where they have the, no, they don't have any right. What right? Don't give them that type of power. for some of you who are Africans or who have the degree as a lawyer, you need to start speaking in other ways. They do not have that power, because when you utter something out, as you know, the people of Africa, this thing you say has power behind it. Don't give them that type of power. So fuck US all the time. The US is done. The US is done, and any African country that accepts the US will end up being a slave again. So more power to Mali, more power to anybody that is going against all this nonsense. I don't care what Russia does to Ukraine. It's none of my business. That is white on white crime. But you guys better be ready. United States is trying to escalate this war.
They're sending more money. They're trying to send more. I don't know what for, but
Well,
they're
because
sending more aid.
Ukraine is sucking the nipple of Big Daddy, you know.
Uh-huh.
Mind you, this is the money that should be given to the FBAs, right?
Right.
This,
Right.
you need to start speaking up. This
Right.
is
Yeah,
your
but
money.
hey.
This is your taxpayer money they're spending. So
Hey.
while Ukraine is sucking on Big Daddy nipple,
Yes.
just know this is your money. This is listen, not a single, particularly Nigeria, better not get involved in this stuff. We got problem that we need to solve. You understand? Nigeria should not get themselves involved. We got issues that needs to be solved. And for those of you that have enough education, you need to start sending serious information to all those governments. Stay on your square. Abstain from whatever it is they're doing. And if you feel like you need to support somebody, support Russia, because Big Daddy needs to get whipped. And I'm looking forward to it. That's all I want to say.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. A U.S. lawyer. All right, go ahead, U.S. lawyer.
Let's try this again. Can you hear me?
We hear you fine. You sound loud and clear.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I had to reboot the computer. Okay, first of all, if you look at that 2-hour speech that Vladimir Putin did from the initial, he
Dan Lewis lawyer. U.S. lawyer. Come on, man. We lose.
No,
we lose.
no,
Like, are you talking into the phone?
You can't
Are you
hear
talking
me now?
into the phone? I mean,
You start off high, then you drift down.
You drift down. I don't know if you move.
You know,
like,
if you're on your phone, turn on the internet, and then turn on the internet. Make sure that. Well, actually,
I don't know why I'm having a problem, because I
connect your phone to your Wi-Fi. It might get a strong signal.
Okay.
Connect your phone to your Wi-Fi.
Again. I don't know what the problem is. Let me see.
No, you don't have to log all the way out. You don't have to log all the way out. Just connect your phone to its Wi-Fi.
I'm on my headset this way. I normally call. I normally don't have a problem, so I don't know what's.
But are you talking directly into the phone? You sound very low, and then it kind of muffles.
It's a headset. I have him, and let me see if there's some settings that I can set.
Yeah, he was loud when he first started, and then just slowly drifted down.
Yeah, it's your headphones, bro. It's your headphones.
Maybe they're going out.
Headphones, I guess.
I mean, you don't have a phone you call into? I mean,
yeah, but I have let me see if I can make this phone work. I'll try one more time. I appreciate it.
What kind of phone do you have?
Samsung.
What Samsung what?
9.
Well, wireless.
Yeah, I'm not on my phone. I'm on my computer and my headset.
Yeah, but what kind of Samsung you have?
A Samsung Galaxy 9.
That's a decent phone.
It's a Samsung. So you got to upgrade phones, brother.
No, what do you think? Come on now.
Galaxy 9. They're 22 now, U.S. lawyer. You got to.
I know.
I think it's the phone carrier. I think it's the Boost mobile carrier that's really messing things up.
But I'm not on that phone. Let me call on that phone. That phone works fine. I'll call you back.
Okay,
I'm taking that phone all over this globe. Call you back.
Okay, all right, bro. We'll hear you. Hey, listen, I want America Rifleman. If you're still watching this, he said a Samsung Galaxy 9.
That's
I
mean,
they came out in the 90s,
bro. I mean, you could have been upgraded, bro. I mean, you're a lawyer. Come on, American lawyer. You could have been.
Hey, actually, lawyers have the lowest technology. Believe it or not.
Yeah, you know what? Guys, lawyers actually don't like. I'm different because I used to be an engineer. But most lawyers don't like dealing with new technology.
Exactly.
I understand, but 9? I mean, come on.
Listen, Dennis, the most successful lawyer that I knew, he didn't want to upgrade past Windows 95. It was like torture. Like he was fighting to stay with Win 95. Imagine that. So he had an old computer. I was like, what is this? Is this even compatible with anything anymore?
There used to be a program called WordPerfect, and lawyers
Yeah,
kept using that in years beyond its lifespan.
Telling you, WordPerfect. Like and some of these attorneys are wildly successful. He's very old.
Oh yeah,
he was like 70s, 70-year-old attorney. He didn't want to give up his Win95 system. It was a mess. But
to Nigel, if you want to call in if that's Sim Police, I want to hear from Sim Police. Sim Police links in the chat room. To Nigel links in the chat room, and then I really would love to hear from America Rifleman. I know he was in there, but and I want to hear from brother American Lawyer, but it's just his headphone is janky.
American Lawyer seemed like he had some interesting perspectives. He seemed like a very informed guy. So I was really looking forward to hearing what he had to say. Hopefully he can get the Boost Mobile situation going. We can go ahead and get phone call.
I was going to say, to sort of go back to the topic a little bit here.
Go ahead.
Ebube start speak. Okay, hold on a second. Yeah, sorry. To go back to the subject in terms of Africa. So this bill 711, the bill itself is the preliminary. What comes after the bill? Because the bill is really to go gather the information and bring this back to Congress. The question is, what are you going to do with that information? That's really the effect, and that's how American laws are kind of set up. They're set up where, in this case, they go fact find, gather information, do all kinds of things, get that information, and then it comes back, and then it goes into America's strategic planning, whatever it is that the government or the agencies, the appropriate agencies recommend. So it's going to be hard to say up front necessarily what they're going to do with this information. But a couple of things. Even though there's a what do you call it, a sanction on Russia, it's not on Russian fuel. That, in other words, it's not on Russia's hydrocarbons.
Not to interject, I think today the EU, they split as far as, I think half of the EU countries are gonna, I guess, phase out.
Phase it out.
Yeah. Correct.
The other half are going to keep using it. But go ahead.
But I just want to make it clear from a legal perspective that there are no sanctions on Russian gas or oil. The EU have their own objective. Now, what that means then is that if you have money and you buy crude from Russia, you can certainly buy crude from Russia. It's not part of the sanction, and also if you buy Russian gas, the Europe and the NATO countries have their own sanctions. And part of the problem, as I mentioned earlier, is that Germany, which is the biggest economy, which you combine, Germany's economy is about the size of UK and France combined. That's how big it is. They have 60% of their gas comes from Russia, and so they really are in a pickle because they would like to, be much more tougher. So, but coming back to Africa, the big effect this is going to have on Africa that I can see just looking at the thing is, I'm going to make some assumptions based on historical actions. One. Any kind of a military operation with Russia is going to draw literally the ire of the U.S. And it doesn't matter if we agree with it or not. I'm just telling you that any kind of a military. Now, when it comes to the economic, because there's an economic component to this, Russia doesn't have much aid to give because, again, it's not a very big economy. But what Russia have is military might. That's really what it's a primary exporter of. And its involvement in Africa is surrounded with military. So Mali and all those countries, they really are, and as Ebube said earlier, Russia is never going to say that the Wagner group is under their control or not. Plausible deniability is going to be the word of the day for them. But I can pretty much, all of us should be able to figure this out, that if you have any kind of a military operation going on with Russia, you're going to have a problem. And the question for you then is this: if you are dealing with Russia, if you're dealing with Russia right now, and you know that the weight of a superpower is going to come down on you, what do you do up front? You can be like the kid or the guy who was in front of Tiananmen Square tank, that tank that the guy was in front of. You could be that brave guy, but that brave guy, nobody ever heard from him again. So the question really for Africa is this: the fight between Ukraine and Russia, as far as I'm concerned, as an African, let them fight it out. And frankly, the more they fight it out, the less they have time to go more elsewhere, especially in Africa. But the raw material, the food situation, the grain situation is a big problem. It is a big problem because Russia and Ukraine accounts for about 90% of Africa's grain imports. And so the resolution of this war is going to affect food production in Africa. It's going to affect can people eat, right? I read where Egypt has 2 months supply, and that was a month ago. So my suspicion now is it's probably a month left supply. So it's gonna create problems. And the one final thing I'm going to say, and then let Ebube, because he what he said was clear to me, and it made perfect sense. The hold the United States have over the world is its dollar. It's interesting. The Chinese companies that do business will not break the sanctions because they don't want to be locked out of the Western market, and the punishment would be that they get locked out of the Western market. So the United States can only sanction you if you use the United States dollar as a part of your trade. So if you buy something from Russia and you use US dollar, you're going to have a problem, because if that item is sanctioned, they can come after you and come after you really, 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 really big. This is not to say whether it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's the rules of the game. And that is why even the Chinese companies and Indian companies that are, and again, oil is a part of this. They, because Russia right now needs a lot of electronic parts to replace the equipment that they fire. And every missile you fire, you're firing the circuit board. So they need to replace those. And where does it come from? It comes from the West or China. And it's a difficult task for them now because the Chinese companies make most of their money not from Russia, which is a small economy. They make most of their money from either the Chinese market or the Western market. And that therein lies the dilemma. So even if they combine and do whatever they want to do between China and Russia, there is still the issue of where, if you're a business person and 70% of your business or 80% of your business is in the West.
Hey, African Airways, if you could, we got Sim Police and Two Niger on here. I know everybody's long-winded.
No, I'm done. I'm done.
Okay. All right. Two Niger, go ahead, Two Niger.
Yeah. Linus, seriously, am I the dumbest guy on these streets? Why do you keep, sidelining me like that? It's not nice.
Listen. Why are you coming out here to complain? Like, why are you coming out here?
I'll complain like a baby. I'm not. I will complain, but I just made a statement anyway. I didn't complain that for that long.
So we got. Go ahead, Two Niger. We love you, Two Niger. Go ahead.
All right. You see, this law that was being passed in the US is part of the point that I raised the last time, that America is pan-European and pan-Zionist, but not pan-African. And we sit there and let that keep happening as if we don't have our own people there. And this is something that we need to change. With the listen, the reason why they are going after Russia now, you see, most of the time when you hear all these wars, they have other reasons behind the reason that they are claiming to be doing it. Why are they antagonizing Russia? Because they know that the North Sea is going to it's going to start melting, which it's already doing, and Russia will start having access to the sea. Russia is becoming more and more of a seafaring nation sooner or later, and they want to curb it. They want to keep it in check because that could change the dynamics of power in the world in the near future, and that is a plan. The Russians call it the Arctic policy. So these are the dynamics playing around in the world, but then they are bringing Africa into it and threatening Africa with all kinds of recriminations and sanctions, whatever they want to call it, if we decide to pick sides. And many African countries are non-aligned. And I'm already hearing our leaders now talking about, we have to become aligned. We have to start aligning with the West. Or no, we don't have to. We already messed up. What else are they going to do? What else are they going to do? They're going to come and start carpet bombing us because we refuse to do what they want. They already done the worst they can do to us. So the other day, the Pakistani president came along. You know, they removed him from office recently. He said there is evidence that the Americans removed him from office. That they literally came in and said, if you don't choose sides with Russia, between Russia and us, we're going to make sure that they remove you in no vote of confidence. And they did. And he said, why is it that they allowed Russia, this in India, to get away with it? India is trading with Russia just fine. But for them, they are not allowed to get away with it, just like they're treating Africans now. This is why when you are weak, this is what they do to you. They bully you when they know they can get away with it. And Africans, they need to start getting their act together. And I must say, there are some good signs that I saw the other day. Africa is creating a counter-terrorism force now. The continent itself is creating a counter-terrorism force, and this is the beginning. Because this type of bullying, they just can't keep bullying. What are they going to do? What more have they not done already? Is Congo going to be any poorer? Screw them. Don't buy into any of their threats. That's what I say on that one. And you, Ebube, you were saying that we should toe the line. Toe the line for what else are they going to do?
That's not what I said. Hey,
you said we should weigh it and say because America is stronger and given our situation right now, we should do what America wants.
I never said any of those words. Maybe you're thinking about somebody else. But I'll respond later. But I never said that. What I said is this: is that at the end of the day, it's about a power dynamic, and that's just the truth. But continue.
Yeah, I think that's basically the point I came to make. And about relationships. Like I didn't like the way the Malians did their relationship with Russia, because Africa right now, why do we even take on any petty relationship anymore? If you want to have a relationship with Africa, Africa should be demanding for the real deal. If Russia wants to come in, are you going to give me nuclear technology? You gave it to China. China gave it to Pakistan. Why are you coming to? You want to come and do what the Europeans did too? If you want real relationship with me, and Africa is a massive continent for crying out loud, why would you just come in there and you bring soldiers into Central African Republic, keep hunting terrorists all over the place, and you went to Iran, you helped Iran? Why would they come to Africa? And we should not be signing any stupid deals, because in the end, we are all messed up. You just bring Russians in to come and fight the Europeans. What difference does that make? We are still messed up. They are not developing our countries.
Okay.
So we should not sign any stupid deals anymore.
Sim Police Academy, go ahead, brother. Sim Police Academy, go ahead and mute yourself.
Let me unmute this mic and let me get to work real quick on this topic, man. First thing first, man, we want to salute the brother Dynasty Amir's platform for letting us come on and have a voice, man. I would never come on anybody's platform with no matter if my logic is for the channel or against the channel, without respecting the platform, without respecting the house, man. You know what I'm saying? The person that's giving me the voice. It's salute to the panel, salute to the chat. Now, you know, the thing about it is when we come to this social media thing, we have people that's intellectuals. You get what I'm saying? So intellectual people are really not war ready people. You get what I'm saying? It's that's the funny thing about Africans and Black Americans. You get what I'm saying? You don't let emotional people, you know, put war strategy together. You know, it just always takes me back to when, you know, I was out there on the streets being a thug, and you know, it took this. We was trying to go to war, you know, just war with each other, because that's what Black people do. You know what I'm saying? We kiss everybody else ass, but we war with each other. And you know, it was this crackhead and this guy, he used to be a psychologist, you know what I'm saying? A psychiatrist, whatever. And you know, we were just talking, he's at the trap house smoking dope or whatever, and we were trying to go to war with two different sides of the town. And so the white dude was just babbling, but then he started making sense to the point that he was saying that no, if you want to go to war, it's more psychological than anything. You know what I'm saying? He said you don't just go to war to destroy the people that you're going to war with. He said you want to make enemies allies, and you want to make enemies close friends. You get what I'm saying? So with a lot of times, even when the brothers in the African always, and the other brother was speaking, they were saying, well, you know, with Russia, what they was expecting, what Russia could do, you know what I'm saying? But it's no losing. It's no losing just because I don't pull out the bomb. You get what I'm saying? So a lot of times as people, we look at war as a fanboy, you know what I'm saying? Or the same way like y'all were using the analogy earlier about LeBron facing the Atlanta Hawks. You get what I'm saying? And you expect for it to be done in 5 games. But for a person with an evil mind, or animal, well, let's say an apex predator, you get what I'm saying? Sometimes it can just be an exercise. Sometimes it could just be to get rid of their old equipment. We don't know. One thing U.S. lawyer was right about, Putin never gave a strategy. You get what I'm saying? Even when I listened to all of his speeches, and what he said was he was just being politically correct. It's the same thing with the way Americans speak. You know, you get the presidents and the senates talking when they behind doors dropping bombs in this part of Africa, dropping bombs over here, and this other the eastern part of Africa doing covert mission. They got black sites, they got CIA black units, they got rogue units. So it doesn't matter what one person says. Of course, you can say that's the word of mouth, but a politician to say anything. If you believe what a politician say for his word of mouth, then you need to go in the bathroom and cut your throat. You get what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is you can choose when you want to believe and when a politician is talking. So when it comes to Russia, if Russia would have came in and just totally just destroyed Ukraine, then not only would it have been the Western media attacking them, then it would have been everybody else. They would have made them look like a bloodthirsty dog. Even though it looks bad far as anything, war is bad, but he's still giving Ukraine those little wins that the United States propping up. You know what I'm saying? Like it's the greatest battle Ukraine could ever do. You know what I'm saying? That's the psychological warfare. You get what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is that we look at things on like some verses, like football, soccer team. We expect the dominant soccer team just to destroy the weak soccer team. You get what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, the tactics was never explained, not the first or the second. So when we think about the Russians losing, that's only Western talking points. You know what I'm saying? I listen to old media everywhere. If it's not Westernized media, you know what I'm saying, everybody else is kind of neutral. It's only Western media that says they shot out a window out of a Western tank. They'll make it sound like it's the greatest victory and Putin lost, and then they got all these CIA agents. Everybody's coming in trying to say what Putin is thinking. You get what I'm saying? And this man is an ex-KGB. He ain't said a word. You get what I'm saying? But it's so many people that's putting that putting words in his mouth. So even if it sounds good to a lot of people, it is good. But like the brother said, war has never been War has never been called out by Putin. You get what I'm saying? So he was right. It was an exercise that turned into it. And another thing, the 200,000 soldiers at the border, no, that was westernized predictions. You know what I'm saying? Putin never said he had 200,000. The Kremlin never said it was 200,000. It was Western media just because they're fear-mongering. You know what I'm saying? They like to be America versus Russia. So when we talk about far as the equipment and the military equipment that they sitting over there, you know, America was sitting over the shit that was in the basement. You get what I'm saying? They weren't sending nothing that can literally take over. You get what I'm saying? Because you can't take over from a country that has supersonic missiles. Supersonic ballistic missiles. The only two countries that has those is China and Russia. So no matter how much we think that Russia ain't ready, Russia still got supersonic missiles and the USA don't. No matter how much we think China is second or third, China has supersonic ballistic missile and the USA don't. Where the United States win is that we have more submarines, we have more aircraft carriers. You get what I'm saying? But when you come into a landmass, the war games is different. When you coming from a Navy standpoint, then the war is different. You get what I'm saying? So you know, at the end of the day, Africa will lose in any deal that's being done because Africa is just the fine, pretty, sexy chick. You know what I'm saying? That, you know, she just get fucked by everybody. Nobody ain't trying to marry her. Everybody just trying to bust up in her.
All right. Let me interject a little bit.
That's Africa.
Thank you. Thank you. One moment.
Hypersonic. You're right too, Nigel. My fault. Not supersonic. Hypersonic. I'm thinking about JJ Fan.
Let me go ahead and say one or two things. That was very interesting. Thank you for the contribution. Extremely interesting. It was a bit of, you know, you put a little bit of your own background into it. Much appreciated. What I'll say is this. I think some people misunderstood. When you look at a war, right? When you look at a war, there are always objectives of that particular war, right? So when the Normandy beaches were stormed during D-Day, there was a clear objective, right? A clear objective. Land on the beach and completely take Normandy. Why? Because the channel, the British channel that you have to cross is very choppy. And if you don't cross at a certain point and get enough troops over, you're dead in the water. So when it comes to a war, there are clear objectives, right? So now you look at Russia. What's happening in Russia is geopolitics. You got too much flat land, and you don't want an unfriendly military there. What's essentially happening to them is a reverse of the Cuban Missile Crisis. If you think back and you remember why America almost went to war with Cuba and the Soviet Union, it's the same premise, just a land version of what Cuba represented to America. So now the objectives, the stated objectives of the Russians, which makes sense, is to reduce. Okay, if you ever played football, right, you may think that it's the other way around. But when the defense is on the 5-yard line, it's actually easier to defend because there's less field behind you. When you're at the 50-yard line, it's harder to defend because you're defending all that territory.
Ebube, I play football.
Think about it like this.
Hold on. Let me interject. One second, man.
When you have,
that's just something that people say, man. That's really not true.
Simply, that's not true, for a second. If your receivers can only go 10 yards, they can't pull everybody down, so the defense has less field to actually protect.
But hear me out, just hear me out, brother. But if you're on the 5-yard line versus the 50, you're in scoring position. So you're gonna walk away with a field goal. So it really doesn't matter.
But it's easier to defend because there's less field. Now, whether or not you defend it is another thing. But technically, Your corners get to come up. Everybody gets to come up. Now you just can't let them get that 10 yards. But if you think about it, it's easier to defend against certain offenses, I'd say. So, for example, if you got a West Coast offense.
Well, that's true.
If you're pass reliant, that's when I was trying to get to that point all the way. So now
I get what you're saying.
Simply just calm down for a second. Let's just talk in
I
terms.
agree with you. What are you talking about?
Just chill for a second. Now, here's the issue, right? It's about goal objectives. Russia's particular goal objective here is to minimize the amount of land they have to defend. That was a goal objective. Unfortunately, they weren't able to get their original goal, which was to get to the river, where there's 3 main crossing points, and then they were going to set up at those 3 main crossing points and then try to exert further pressure to collapse the nation into 3 to 4 nations, as they had laid out. However, in the northern,
that was that goal. I'm lost on that point. You keep repeating that, but I never heard. I watched all of it. You keep saying they did not reach. You keep saying it, and then you start monologuing. That's what U.S. lawyer kept saying. You keep saying things that Putin didn't say.
I'm not
it doesn't matter. But what I'm saying is, you can sit up there in a suit and you can sit up there in a suit and tie and be wrong as hell. You keep saying that man didn't reach no 3 objectives. He never gave an objective.
Okay, hold on.
I'm just lost on that.
Yeah, you're lost. But the thing is, you told us last time.
No, you're lost. So you keep saying what somebody's objective is. You never said the objective. So how can you say what somebody's objective is if you ain't heard them say it? How you gonna say what their objective is if you ain't heard them say it?
Relax. What we'll do is we'll take turns.
Here we go. Ebube, one more minute. Hold on, Simp. I'm gonna give you a chance, Simp. I'm gonna let you land, Simp. Hold on. Ebube, one more minute, then Simp, you go ahead.
Yeah, and here's the thing, Simp, please. Maybe you're just not informed, but you said earlier that you were taking your advice from a crackhead in the trap house. Maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe you should actually get informed. But here's the thing, right? The only thing you have is you come in with a lot of screaming and a lot of yelling, and you talk over people, and you don't really say anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the floor, and you're not going to have much to say because I don't really believe you're that informed.
I appreciate it. You don't have to tell me what I'm going to say. Just pass the mic. All you're doing is monologuing. That's the same thing when that guy asked you the question. All you did is start monologuing. Dinah's asked you a simple question. You start monologuing for 15 minutes. You get what I'm saying? And you did not answer the question. You keep saying that he did not reach his objective when he never put out objective. He didn't say nothing about he trying to take no rivers or none of that. Those words never came out his mouth. But you keep repeating it as if it's facts. And then since he don't do something that you're repeating, then you turn around and say, well, he didn't reach that. That makes no sense at all. You get what I'm saying? So now me, I'm the type of person, if I don't know what I'm talking about, I just won't say anything. But I know I listened to the speech. You get what I'm saying? I listened to what the speech he said before it happened. I listened to the speech before he came to brought the troops over there for the exercise, and I listened to every speech he said, and not one word when he'd only put out 3 speeches. 3 speeches since this whole thing went on, and not in one of those speeches that he gave out any objective. 3 objectives, 2 objectives, 1 objective. Talk about no river, no lake, no backyard pool, no Lake Lanier, and not one of those speeches. So you keep saying it over and over as if like having on a suit and a tie makes it right. You get what I'm saying? That's the only point I'm making.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
Okay. Do you really expect that any government, in this case, it happens to be Russia who is doing this, would you really expect them to come out and say, hey, this is exactly what I'm going to do?
But this is my okay. By that logic, by your own logic, if you said brother, you asked me a question, so I'm finna give it to you I'm finna answer your question based on logic. If I don't expect, I just said before, I don't believe nothing no politician said. You get what I'm saying? Now one of them. I actually said that if you listen to what any politician said, you need to go in the bathroom and cut your throat. Did I not say that? I don't believe what none of them say. But what I won't do is just sit up there and just lie on somebody or make up something. But so to make up something to push my narrative. You get what I'm saying? So when I'm saying this, I'm with you. Of course, he wouldn't go in there and say whatever it is. But at the same time, I'm not gonna sit up and make if I'm not gonna believe what he's saying when he didn't say nothing. I'm not going to make up nothing, and I'm not going to believe nothing that he says anyway. So what I'm saying is to talk about he didn't meet his objective, we don't know what his objective is because he didn't make any. It's the same reason. No, go ahead.
Can I posit something to you? If you, I remember hearing you mention that you're a business person. So you obviously have to think strategy because you're a business person. You sell, you project the market, you do whatever you have to do to get your business going. So many of the decisions you make, you don't have facts necessarily to back it up, but what you have is historical data, or you might have a precedence that was set. And so when you as a business person make the decision, you use history as your guide. That's what intelligent people do, and you are one of them. So when you look at anything in life, whether it's a war or a business, there are strategies behind them, unless the people are crazy.
You're right.
Or stark or even mad. Now,
there are strategies behind it. You're right.
Correct. And no strategy as a business person is 100%. In other words, most of the time is 20/20 hindsight that you can look and say, yeah, what I did was perfect. But you still make decisions even though you know you're not 100% certain. That's what life is all about.
That's true.
It's the same exact thing in war. What the question I would have for people who ask this question is this: look at where if you put yourself in Putin's situation, and you've got 200,000 troops and you've got 10,000 tanks.
Hold on. Stop right there for a second. Where do you get the 200,000 troops from?
Call it 100,000 troops, whatever you want to call it.
No. I ain't asking. I'm asking you. What I'm saying is that if hold on, brother. What I'm saying is, if I brought up a number, I would be able to stand by it and tell you where that number came from.
The numbers come from. I tell you where the numbers come from. The numbers come from the West's analysis. No, you can
exactly. So that's what I'm saying. So the person. Hold on for a second.
But let me interject. I've been keeping up the war as well. The amount of lies and propaganda that's coming from the West.
Come on, man.
Yeah. I mean, that 200,000 number.
One thing we know, and this can be you know, when a tank is destroyed, you can go look at the corpse of the tank. When a machine gun is destroyed, you can go look at the corpse of the machine gun. These are, it's hard to hide, thousands of tanks that get destroyed. It's hard to hide that kind of stuff. No matter how much of a propaganda Ukraine or Russia want to put, it's hard to hide a lot of equipment that you are losing. Okay? Now, my question is a very simple question. Why devote that much troops to the northern part of a country? Because anyone who knows anything about war, basic 101, knows the hardest place to attack is a city. The bigger the city, the harder it is. As a matter of fact, you might even get down to hand-to-hand combat. That's why everybody tries to avoid it. Now, why would somebody commit that much troops up there? That's a simple question I have for people.
Okay, but one second. Okay, when you say that number, what number specifically?
Exactly.
If it's 1,000 or 5,000, I am saying, why would you commit? Because everyone knows defending a city is a very difficult thing to do, or attacking a city. In other words, defeating a city, since the dawn of time, since the war existed, it has always been the most difficult place to attack and to defeat, and also to defend. Why? This is going to simply police academy. Very simply, I'm asking a simple question.
Yeah, go ahead and ask it, man.
The question is, why would someone commit a significant number of their resources to something that is very difficult to defend in the beginning, risk the destruction or the elimination of that equipment. If they didn't think that somehow in their minds they could accomplish this. Now, you might say one final thing.
Are you going to ask the question or are you going to monologue?
But I'm going to give you one condition. You might say it's a decoy, but no one, even in a decoy situation, risk that much. So my question to you is, why would they do that?
Well, first of all, that's real simple. I can't answer why would he go? Why would he do what he do? It's the same reason why would any dictator do what they do? You know what I'm saying? Why does North Korea do what they do? That's neither here nor there. But what I'm saying is that when you first started talking, I was listening real well. You based on Russia's win, a swift domination based on the 200,000. That 200,000 number push your whole argument of why you were saying how quickly they should have won. So by Western media propaganda, you're thinking that, okay, well, if I had 200,000, I would run in there in Kiev and I would just destroy it. But you're actually not brainwashed in the sense of total brainwash, but you're actually brainwashed by Western media too, because you formed your opinion based on a number that they said. I know for a fact by watching all of this that Russia never gave out a number of how many people that they send over there. But what I'm saying is, if nobody would have came on here and gave you pushback on that number and push back on the other brother on if that was put in words or not, the people, because black people, we don't read nothing. We get our information 15 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, YouTube, Instagram, and all that. So it's just like they always say, the gazelle story would never be told if they don't never defeat the lions. If the lion's gonna tell the story, they're gonna always tell the story in their behalf. So the front page is gonna say roar, roar, roar. It ain't gonna say shit about the gazelles winning. So only thing I'm telling you is that I can't answer the question other than Kyiv is no match for Russia. So it's anything that we think is a win, it's just psychological. You get what I'm saying? And it's psychological to get us, because there's only a small part of the population that against them sending aid. And this mostly black people. It ain't that many white people in America that against them sending aid. It's black people, because black people want their student loan paid. You know what I'm saying? They want their stimulus checks. You get what I'm saying? But white people are not complaining because it's white people that don't like Russia. Black Americans, we got nothing against Russia.
So that we don't go too far. U.S. lawyers are trying to get on. Let's give them some time. And then,
okay, U.S. lawyer. Did you go?
Is it going to work this time?
Did you go to T-Mobile and upgrade to at least the S12?
No, S20. My phone is fine, brother. But I know you don't like my phone. My phone is 2 years old, but that's okay.
You got that Note 9?
That phone has gone all over for me, so I'm fine with it. I've got a couple phones. I have a backup phone, but can you hear me now?
We'll try to work with it, man. Go ahead.
Go ahead, man. I'll let you go ahead, man. Go ahead.
All right, I'm gonna say a couple things. The other guy was right on a couple points, and the primary points are that we don't really know what Putin's original plan was, because he didn't tell you what the plan. The only thing he said was denazify and demilitarize, and you don't have to go. Although Russians are very aware of the history of Nazis because of World War II, and they did lose like 27 million people. You don't have to go back that far, because they were been actively involved in a war against them by some Nazi forces that have been shelling the Donbass since this coup in 2014.
The Azov battalion, correct?
Correct. And these people have infiltrated all levels of the government. And matter of fact, after they went in initially and they had those other two agreements, I can't think the other two agreements they had, they couldn't implement those agreements because those Nazis threatened the president and said if you give up any land, they would kill him. So Russians, and you've had over about 1 million some Russians in the last year. Over 1 million Russians have fled from the Donbass area and some from Crimea, but they fled into Russia because they've been constantly shelling them. These people have been getting shelled constantly, like 15,000 deaths. So Russia didn't have to go back to World War II to understand the danger they were threatening. The other thing is NATO was not in Ukraine. Okay, Ukraine was not in NATO, but NATO was in Ukraine because they were building up all the NATO military. They've been training them for 8 years. This is what this whole big thing with Trump was, where they were trying to get him because he was on the phone with Zelensky and he wouldn't send some money over. This has been a project. This project to put NATO, or at least put NATO weapons in Ukraine, has been going on since Obama and that sponsor coup that went on with Victoria Nuland and those people back then. So that's what I'm saying. We don't really know. And so militarization, we don't know how far he went to go because Putin's a very practical person. I don't care what they try to tell you about him. There's no proof that he wanted to go that far. What he did want to do is prevent NATO and prevent them having that's military, all these NATO equipment and stuff on this border, and also protect the Donbass area, because what he complained about was, he said the problem we had is that when the Soviet Union dissolved, we had Russian citizens were all over the world found themselves in countries that they didn't vote for. They found themselves in new countries, and sometimes they were hostile to them. And so what he said is Russia had vowed that they would go rescue Russian citizens when wherever they were at. Matter of fact, if you look at some of the non-Western sources about them in Mariupol and some of the other places that they've taken over, you see Russian women out there waving them, were flagging them when they came through, were waving at them on the side of the road and giving them gifts. And I've seen Russian women walking up to them and saying, finish this job. They've been telling them to finish it. Get this job over. We've been living with these people for 8 years. They've been doing this to them. They've been trying persecuting Russians. They've been trying to legislate Russians out of existence. Russians could not speak the Russian language. They've been trying to eliminate Russian culture. You had a lot of hatred for Russians and a lot of racial kind of hatred for Russians. So that was his whole plan. We don't know what he planned to do beyond that because he didn't tell you. So all this other Western speculation, you cannot rely upon that, because one thing I know from dealing with the government for the last 10 years, most of my cases have all been with the government. I know one thing about the governments: from top to bottom, they lie from top to bottom. These are trained liars. That's what they do for a living. And I've had other brothers that I work with, ex-prosecutors, who work with me on some defense stuff dealing with the government. And I can always figure out where the government's lying. Sometimes brothers can't see it. Okay, but what I'm saying is, we don't know. You can't believe anything the West says. So one thing Putin said in that speech that was accurate, he said the West was an empire of lies, and that's what it is. But what we have is this we're trying to keep this hegemonic unipolar world going, and the sun is setting on the West. If you look at something, that whole thing about Russia was just a gas station, was just a country, was a gas pump, masquerading as a country. It's not true. Russia does have an integrated economy and have some other things going. They need to boost their technology, which Putin has admitted, but they're close to China to be able to do that. But Russia is also self-sufficient. That's why right now, if you look at all the Western economies, Russia has one of the best. The ruble is highest it's ever been. It's the best. Ruble is going to be the best performing currency of this year. Okay, and that's because the Russians have been planning for this all along, because it's been going on for 8 years. But the last thing we'll say about this Zelensky guy, this actor, Zelensky is not giving speeches. That stuff's been written somewhere in the Pentagon, somewhere in NATO, the speeches he's been given. This guy's an actor, and he's playing a role. He came into office as an actor. He came in from playing a character in a movie by this billionaire oligarch that's dual citizens with Israel. He came in, that guy put him, he played, I think it was called The Citizen or something. He was a president in a show that was in Ukraine. And then they actually put him and he ran for president. And then, if you look at Zelensky in the Panama Papers, they said this guy's got almost $1 billion somewhere. This didn't just happen. And this invasion, people have probably been wondering why it took so long, because if you look like people like Noam Chomsky, if you look at Henry Kissinger, they've been saying for 20 years that they knew the one thing that would get Russia, and they said no matter who the Russian leader was, that leader would feel compelled to invade Russia, is if you put Ukraine in Russia. Now, the worst thing about this was Zelensky said when he was frustrated, he said that they told him in private that the Ukraine was never going to join NATO, but he had to say that in public. But the image they were going to put out was that he was going to join NATO. So what that tells you is this guy invited an invasion into his country when he on a false premise. This was all one big setup they were doing. But the bottom line is, we don't know what the plan was. Putin didn't say he changed his plan. He just said that he's been announced in different phases. We don't know what the phase was.
All right, U.S. lawyer, let me clear some things up for you. Thank you for your contribution. Then we're gonna go to YEAAD. U.S. lawyer, here's the thing. Here's what you want to look at, right? I think too much attention is being put on the wrong things. You don't just listen to the media and say this is what it is.
Point. You don't need to pontificate. You're not that intelligent. You don't need to pontificate. You don't need to pontificate. You're not that intelligent. I can reach any courtroom any other week anywhere. You're not on my level. You're not that intelligent. Just make your point.
Put down mute, please.
Yes, Laura. Let him finish. Let him finish. Go ahead.
Yeah, you said what you had to say. That's great. Now here's the issue, right? You know, and everybody here, you know, there's no need to be emotional or hot-headed. Everybody can be cool. Just please, U.S. Lord, can you just relax for a second? All right, there we go. Now I doubt it, but here's how we're gonna do this thing, right? So now when you analyze something, and I think you guys might be looking at it.
Just say what you need to say.
What's going on, man? I can't continue with this guy keep interrupting me like this. All right, so now let him finish. Yeah. So what we have here is we have a situation where when you look at something, and this is what I kept saying, it's all about geopolitics, right? Now, geopolitics causes conflict. The whole point is that you have these nations on this flat land. When you have flat land, it's easy to invade. That's why I brought up World War II, how Hitler was so successful until the winter took him out of Russia. But the problem with Russia is that they have no natural things to anchor themselves against. This has been the threat since the days of the Soviet Union and why they pushed all the way up until Eastern Germany. So now when you have that situation, that informs you the geography. See, geopolitics, and this is something a lot of people don't understand, but I'm going to give you something tonight. When it comes to geopolitics, the geography of a place can dictate its politics. So now if you have a flat plane that can be easily invaded, you might find yourself invading a nation that sits on that same plane because they're no longer your ally. That's why I brought up the example of Canada and America. The border is flat and it's long. So if Canada ever became an enemy of America, America might have to invade Canada because it's just too dangerous to have such an enemy with such a flat, long border. So now, initially, when you analyze it based on that, you can glean certain information from it. Nobody's saying go and just listen to a politician because a politician will tell you anything. What you really want to look at is you want to listen to them with one ear, but then you want to use your two eyes to actually observe the situation in a cool, calm manner. And you got to realize in life, the people that come with a lot of energy, shouting and yelling, that are very emotional, are typically the guys with nothing to say. The empty barrel makes the most noise. The guys that are really cold and calculating and really can analyze something, those are the really dangerous people because they're actually thinking while you're being emotional. But anyway, YEAAD, you got the floor. What do you have on
the Yeah, go ahead, Yeed, go ahead.
Greetings, everyone. Greetings, dynast, and everyone on the panel. How's everyone doing today?
Good. Doing good.
Brilliant. I'll start by asking a question. I just want like a straight I agree or I disagree. And the question is, does anyone on this panel agrees that if this bill passes, they agree with it? And does anyone on this panel, if this bill passes, disagree with it? So
I disagree.
I disagree too.
Definitely in disagreement. It's too big.
Yeah, America and Africa can eat sweaty monkey balls, as far as I'm concerned.
It was a I agree or disagree question, please. So we've had U.S. lawyer disagree, dynast disagree, Okoli disagree, African always, two Nigerians.
I disagree.
Sim Police Academy.
They both shit eaters. I disagree.
Okay. And African Always, are you there?
I disagree conditionally.
Okay, so now we
And it
have,
has already passed the House by 419 to 9. It
yeah,
means, yeah, our
Okay,
people
but
actually voted
let's
for
find out
it.
what
yeah.
the condition is.
I've actually read the bill on this channel, and so I am aware of what's going on. So now, having said that, one thing for certain is I have said it here before, and I'll say it again. It's a bridge of international law. No country should actually dictate to not just a country, but an entire continent, a sovereign continent, what who they should do business with, who they should have diplomatic relations with, and what kind of investments should go between both countries. Now, having said that, are you all aware that Russia has investments in the African Import and Export Bank? Russia has investment in the African Development Bank. And I heard people talking about food crisis. Leaving that, moving on, I heard people talking about the food crisis in on the continent, and it's going to impact the continent. Actually, the African Development Bank CE chairman and president actually categorically stated that, and I'll read this. Our Feed Africa High Five work has already benefited over 76 million farmers with access to improved agricultural technologies. President of the African Development Bank, Adesanya, said. He said the continent must be a solution for food to the world because it has 65% of arable land. The president said, though Africa was faced with a lot of challenges, the the bank was not deterred by the challenges. Adesanya said the African Development Bank and the African Union Committee had developed the Africa Emergency Food Production Plan. He said the plan would provide 20 million farmers with improved seeds and fertilizer, as well as other farm inputs, to produce 38 million tons of food worth $12 billion. Adesanya said the food would include 11 million tons of wheat, surprise, surprise, 18 million tons of maize, 6 million tons of rice, and 2.5 million tons of soya beans. I needed to read that. So the idea that, there's going to be famine on the continent, we need to throw that out as we move forward. Now, with regards to Ukraine Russian conflict, military wise, the proclamation was to denazify and demilitarize Ukraine. That's the official statement. Everything else is speculative, right? But however, with regards to the actions that was done in the wake of, this special military operation, we saw from Belarus Russian forces go down towards Kyiv. Now, you need to go back to 8 years prior with 2014 and what has been happening in the Donbass region. There have been 14,000 deaths in the Donbass region. Where do they get their strategic command from? Where do they get their supplies of weaponry from? It's predominantly from Kyiv. That's where their line of communication, military wise, and equipment comes from, right? So for them to come first to Kyiv and destroy the military outpost in Kyiv, whether they wanted to take over that city or not, that's speculation at this point. However, with what we have seen from what President Putin had said was, the first phase was over, the next phase begins. Now they're focusing on the south and the Donbass region. Having said that, that's military strategy. You have to take out the source of the weapons, and that's why even right now, whenever Western weaponry gets into Ukraine, what happens is a strike at the location happens.
It gets destroyed. It gets
Yeah,
destroyed.
a strike at the location. That's military strategy. Anyone who has had any kind of military training will let you know that the first thing you do is you go for the source. After you go for the source, then you focus on what your operation is supposed to be. So it's 101 in military strategy. However, obviously with media, they had to, you know how media is. You know, the first thing in combat, in any conflict or war, is the truth is the first casualty of war. So the media played their roles, and that's why you're having several people come and say, "Oh, they missed it. It was a decoy," and things of that nature. That's not true. That's what you do in military strategy 101. You first go for the first thing is the source of the weaponry, the command positions, and once you have done that, demilitarize that point, then you now focus. You have cut off the supply of the soldiers that you're actually going to be battling, and then you go to them. By the time they get by the time they can recoup from what you have done initially, you would already be attacking them. Remember that even on CNN, MSBC, and all these Western, even BBC Western media houses, they were talking about who would get to the Donbass region first. That was what they started saying after President Putin had said the first phase was over and the second phase. They specifically military and CIA and all these intelligence and military generals will say the goal now is who will get to the Donbass first. Now, in a situation with Russia and Ukraine, what makes it more volatile is having so much money pumped by the Western, bloc into Ukraine, and also machineries. So that means that you're having money coming in, you're having weapons coming in, you're having machineries coming in. So even though that it might have Russia destabilized the military command, they were able to get back on with it at a relatively fast speed. And with 40 billion of foundational Black Americans reparations money going to Ukraine, all that, definitely that that is drawing war for the long haul. And with that, I yield the mic. Thank you, ladies, gentlemen.
And I just needed to add something about this.
Hold on, Nigel, man, because he said something about the reparation part with the Black Americans. The thing about it is, Black Americans don't even equate the 40 billion to reparations, because Black Americans don't even know how much money they want, right, Didnt? They don't know if they want 1 trillion, 3 trillion, 3 Escalades, 4 decades, and 2 goat pepper soup. Hold on, we let you talk for you. Nobody interrupted you at all, man. I'm just saying, nobody interrupted you. Nobody interrupted you when you was talking for 5 minutes straight. So I'm just saying that out because you threw that in. So what I'm saying is that Black people don't even equate to 40 billion. But more Black people online, regardless of the FBA, and I don't mean to get off topic, Dinah, but I just want to state the fact. Most people online, the major propaganda when it comes to Black people, they're talking about student loans and all that. It's only a small. When I say small, it's probably 1 to 2%. 1 to 2% of Black people that's talking about reparation. Every other Black person is talking about student loan. They want another stimulus check, and they want higher wages. That's only some internet thing that got the Black Americans against the immigrants, which I'm not a part of at all. But I'm just trying to show you how propaganda can make you think that it's something that the majority of Black American, which is 43 million, ain't talking about reparations. That's not being talked about on. If you go with all the platforms and all the new Black news channels, Black TV, and you put up a graph of how much does reparations get brought up, and it might get brought up 1 to 5% of the time. It's not even a daily discussion on Black people. Just don't talk about it like that. It's only the FBA people that talk about it. But believe me, if Black people, if they was gonna cut a check, if we ever thought that they was gonna cut a check, we would be for it. But why would they have no incentive to cut us a check? That's how most Black people. So we're ready to compete. That's why we don't have anything against out immigrants from other countries, especially black people that look like us, because most of us we competitive. So we like for an immigrant to come over there. That make me compete harder. You know what I'm saying? Make me make more money. I don't feel like an immigrant can take anything from me because one, I'm an apex predator. You know what I'm saying? If I can't get it, I'm gonna take it. You know what I'm saying? That's just how real I am. But at the end of the day, the competition doesn't match up. So just on that level, and when we was talking about the weapons and everything, even the country, America stopped sending them Javelin missiles. That's the real name of the missiles. Those are the missiles that Obama was supposed to send, but instead of Obama sending Javelin missiles to Ukraine, he sent them blankets and pillows and sheets. That's all he sent. It was Trump that sent the Javelin missiles. But the Chinese people and American they're both the technology. Even the guy that produces the Javelin, he came on the news and said that they don't have the equipment to produce for the United States and for the United States to issue out. So the United States stopped giving them Javelin missiles. That's why the package they're playing is more guns, drones. They switched to drones and everything. They couldn't afford to send any more Javelin Stingers for the tanks, and they are not sending long range missiles because they don't want Russia to be like, okay, I'm not in the war against dynast, but I'm helping dynast enemy, shoot up my house. You get what I'm saying? Those are my guns that dynast enemy is shooting at me. And that's why they're not sending the long range missiles. I just wanted to clarify that, Dynast.
I think just to add something to that, I think when they say Russia should have just overwhelmed Ukraine very quickly, I think that is a bit of a red herring, because even Chechnya, that is about 1 point something million people, the war went on for almost 2 years. And Ukraine is 40 something million, and they just expect them to roll over. I don't know why people say that. And also, what I find is that, because this is about Africa in the end. And, we mentioned about reparation. How is that even going to happen? I think what is happening in America is weird. Where the way they passed that vote, a lot of black people voted for that too. To punish Africa in a country that is pan-European. And I think they really need to start understanding that. They just think they are defending America. I think that's what those black people think. They really need to get in their head that this is a pan-European country that you are defending. And when they are attacking your own, you should remember that, hey, that is a black continent that you are sanctioning like that because they didn't take sides. They are not attacking us. They are our friends too. So that is on one side. They brag about it. You see, the AFRICOM that they wanted to open a military base in Zambia the other day, and they are threatening them. And if Pakistan cannot resist them, I really worry for our countries. And there's an election coming up in Nigeria. Pakistan is a nuclear power, and they were able to remove the leader from there. They didn't even hide it. It was in the minutes in their meeting. They were threatening him that if you don't do 2 hour line, we're going to remove you. And they did. So they brag on the AFRICOM website that this is how brazen they are, how easy Africans are to control. You know the term they use? They just need a little bit of money and a few soldiers. A few soldiers is the term they use, and they get outsized return for it. And then when it comes to it, they talked about how they spend 0.3% of the Pentagon's budget on Africa, the entire African continent. And why this is like that is because we are asleep, completely asleep on the wheels. I will give anything to have the problem Russia is having today. Because we are just sitting there like sitting ducks. And for me, this vote that is passed right now is something that our people really need to be opening our eyes to. That these people, their whole policy is for themselves. And everybody defends their people. We need to start learning how to gather our own ideas. And I really thank my God that it looks like African countries are beginning to show signs of it, because they are seeing the dangers now. Because if Africa is now thinking about creating a counterterrorism force, well, they're not thinking about it. Buhari just approved the funds on its own end already. They are already going ahead with it. It tells you that this world know trouble is coming to them. And I don't know how we are going to fight this stuff. I don't have all the answer, but we really need to start thinking about these things, because trouble is coming for us. And these people, like this war that's happening in Europe right now is a facade. Maybe they want to stop Russia from being a seafaring nation, whatever. That's why they keep expanding it to further and further. And besides, that's the main reason why Russia is trying to push them back. They just keep creeping closer and closer to their border. And Russia is like, enough is enough. Go back. For me, that's common sense. But we don't know why they choose now to trigger it. We don't know why they choose this time to trigger it. They are all arming themselves. All these countries, Canada, even Canada, has upped its defense budget. They are passing laws to target Africa. Because the backup of the Western economy is Africa. And they are targeting Africa deliberately right now. And we just sit here and watch it happen. I don't really have the answer, but I really think that we really need to start thinking about it. All our people should do everything with the breath that they have to frustrate all their efforts against the continent. Because this is a massive move that they are making on that continent right now. They've been talking about it for the last 5-10 years, and now they are making the moves. It's coming to fruition.
Can I say something?
Very true. Very true. Africa in always, it's gone in a circle. You have the floor.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to say this. I was told of an expression that when two elephants are fighting, you get out of the hell out of the way if you're a rat or a mouse, if you're small. And to Niger, I agree with you that strategically thinking, Africans would be able to navigate two elephants fighting and not get crushed. But that requires advanced thinking. Where's the think tank in Africa that you're going to have because analyzing, earlier Ebube said, he talked about how the geography of a place can dictate. It not just can, it does dictate in many, many cases how countries are structured, set up, defensive and whatever else. The same thing is true in Africa. The topic here is how will they punish Africa for dealing with Russia? That's the real topic, because we kind of sort of got off on the Ukraine piece, and that's cool. But at the end of the day, what does this mean for Africa? Here's what I believe. If you've been paying attention to any bit of politics from the United States, something like House Bill 7113 or whatever it is going to happen. So let's not kid ourselves. We're in a real world, and there are geopolitical interests. The question is, how do we navigate it as a continent such that the impact on us is as minimal as possible? Russia's impact on Africa is very small. Its footprint is extremely tiny. Let's not forget that in the March for Independence and South Africa's independence, Russia was there, and they weren't there because they were altruistic, because they like black people. They were there because it stuck a pin in the eye of the West. And frankly, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So don't think Russia is your friend, and damn sure America and the West isn't your friend either. So the question then becomes, how do we, because they are going to react, and they are going to go after, any, as I said, the primary one I suspect they're going to go after first is the military one, because Russia doesn't have much of an economic footprint in Africa. So countries like majority of Africa is not going to be affected, because the truth is Russia is invisible there. But in a few countries like Mali, you might see, and the Sahel, you might see a reaction from the United States. The question is, how can we minimize it as a continent? And because we're not unified, because the African Union is just really mostly paper than anything else, they can't address. And in fact, every time there's a problem in Africa, most of the time they run to Europe asking for help, rather than trying to sit down, as Kagame said, sit down and solve it yourself, right? These coups that were in West Africa, people were running to the West looking for help, instead of sitting down and say, let's solve the problem. So I think our bigger problem is not so much. Yes, it's a problem with the U.S. with this thing if they decide to go beyond just the military aspect of it, which I doubt, because again, Russia's footprint in Africa is very small in terms of economics, right? And I still think it's going to be very limited to a small amount. I could be wrong, but that's my analysis of it.
A U.S. lawyer, you have the floor. Do you have anything to add to the
Here's-
conversation, to the discussion?
Here's the thing. First of all, I'm going to say the issue has become these people in Congress that did this, these white people that supported that, they didn't support it because they necessarily believe it's going to protect America. They know the game. They supported it because that's how you get committee positions. If you don't support it, you don't advance in the Democratic or the other parties. They supported it because it's in their political interest, not because it's in the interest of African or black people or for any noble purpose. And what we're going to have to start doing, this real whole thing is only going to be solved at a grassroots level. And what we're going to have to start doing is, he asked where the think tanks, we're going to have to start forming our own little collective think tanks across the pond. And just like you spend a lot of time in Africa, Dynast, I spent a lot of time there. I've got a home there. I'm pretty sure you've got a place or somewhere. We need to start developing these core little groups that get together and do things. Like, for instance, this bill was passed and they didn't hear anything from Africans. There's no phone calls, there's no phone banks, there's nobody
Not
protesting.
one word, not one word.
They're able to do it quietly, and well, they actually not really quietly. They did it openly. And if anybody thinks this bill will not become a pretext for all kinds of things, it will become a pretext for whatever they want to do. And they don't have to have any Russian. You don't have to have any Russian involvement. It's like we know about this whole four things. I knew that was all a hoax from the beginning. All this Russian interference in the election, all that kind of nonsense. Anybody could have figured out it was from Hillary Clinton. And it took 4 years to figure out what you should have been able to figure out in 15 minutes. So, the bottom line is, it will become a pretext for all kinds of nefarious stuff that's going to go in there. But the way this is going to be solved is, we're going to have to develop some connections, some global connections. We're going to have to develop some coalitions that work across borders, and it's going to have to start at the grassroots. And that's really what because it's not going to start up at higher levels. It's going to start at grassroots. And Africans across this world are going to have to become involved in each other's problems. There should be a group in Lagos that's talking about the problems they have in Lagos, that's communicating back to the main group. There should be a group in Nairobi that's talking about the problems there. In other words, and they should be getting together, and we should be thinking about geopolitical ways to solve our problems. But the thing about the Africans is, you cannot let another power, whether it's United States or anybody, dictate to you like that. And the problem we have right now is the Africans. They should be getting together and saying no. And the bottom line is, if they spoke with one voice, they could do something about this. But the problem is that they're too fractured. You have too many people that can be bought off, too many people that are working towards their own interests, and this is the problem we're having with this. And so, ultimately, it's going to be for us, people like us, who get together, who are across geopolitical lines, or get together across geography, and who work together. We're ultimately going to be the ones who are going to have to solve it. And it's going to this kind of leadership is going to have to start from black men. It's going to have to start from black men who the common denominator is that we identify as descendants of Africans, and we're looking to protect that heritage. And we want to see Africans as a whole rise, not some FBA and all this other nonsense. That's just divisive stuff. That's the kind of stuff that if you think about 40 years ago, you would have heard from blacks in the community about this bill. They would have had a hard time with this. But because we've become this fragmentation, I'm ADOS, I'm FBI, all this kind of stuff, there's nobody, they're saying, well, that's the Africans' problems. No, it's your problem too. But because we have this fragmentation, nobody is saying anything or coming to fruition, coming to the table to do anything about it. And that's how this bill is coming to fruition. So I'm saying we can all talk about what's wrong with this bill, and there's the bill is innately wrong. But the thing about it is nothing's going to happen unless we start getting together and form some groups. And those groups are going to have to be a lot of times off the record. Obviously, you can't be doing some of this stuff in public. Okay. But they're going to have to form some individual cells that are going to have to report in some kind of an organization. That's the only way it's going to work. And that is going to be because the world is global now. If you think about what Zelensky told them when he went to the EU, he said, prove you're European. That's what he extorted them. And think about what he was saying. That would be like us saying, hey, I got a problem. You need to prove you're African to come solve this problem. He told them, prove you're European. Okay. And that this whole thing about with Russia, that's a pan-European thing. You got this one European tribe that they don't really consider to be full Europeans that won't go along with all kinds of other things like their homosexuality, their gay agenda, all this other kind of stuff, feminism. They don't go along with that in Russia. And so it's a cultural battle going on, but it's also Russia standing in the way from them from plundering other parts of the country, like in Syria and Libya and African places. So you got this one outlier that's Russia that's not going along, and they're trying to get Russia. They're basically trying to overtake that country and bring it within the sphere, and they haven't been able to do it. But that's all I'm going to end up saying is that ultimately we can talk all about this, but until we do something like right now, there should be some phone banks, some people to call in and let them know, because they can ignore us because we're silent. We say nothing. You know, and some of us can't be out in public because some of us have something to lose. So we're going to, you know, some of us, the problem is like if you have a professional license, you know, that's with your license. That's the way the government works. Okay, so some of us have to be kind of underneath the cover to do it, but there has to be, just like we don't know what goes on. We have members of these think tanks that white people have that are anonymous. We need to have some anonymous members, and we need to have some kind of organization that we get together and we start talking about this with the focus on how we advance our group, you know, internationally. And that's what I leave it.
Yeah, that shit ain't happening.
I think we're gonna round up here. Dynasty.
Yeah, but hold on. Okay, Ebube, what we'll do, Ebube, go ahead and close out. We'll go ahead and close out. So, Ebube, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right, gentlemen, great discussion. African always, solid analysis. Tunaija, you have a really good voice for narration. So regardless of whether I agree with you or not, you have a solid voice for narration. I just love hearing you sonically. YEAAD, solid contributions. U.S. lawyer, great analysis. Sim Police came in with a lot of passion, very strong in your convictions. Thank you for being on this platform. What I'll close out is I'll piggyback off of what U.S. lawyer said. Essentially, what we as all Africans need is a code of conduct, how we treat each other and how we respond externally. Internally, it's okay to have divisions. And it's good that you have African Americans who identify with their specific tribe, because that's another level, but it's not a separate level from being an African. We're all African people. I'm Igbo, but I'm still African. You can be FBA, but still be African. It's just a specific lineage. The only problem comes when we create adverse reactions to those divisions as opposed to using them to empower ourselves within those particular spheres. But I just wanted to say, gentlemen, great contribution from everybody here. And Dynasty, it's on you to go ahead and close out, brother.
Let me say one very quick thing too. I have a site that I just set up. It's called the AfricanUnion.com. Visit it. And the purpose of that site is we have a code of conduct on there. And the purpose of that site is to do pretty much what I was just telling you.
Okay. We appreciate that, everyone. Make sure everybody checks that out. Everyone, thank you so much for joining. Like, share, subscribe. Until next time, family, Dynasty Mirror, search for Huru. Peace.
We go.